Once upon a time, there was a man named Leo, who lived a quiet life in a small, sleepy town nestled among rolling hills and forests. Leo was an introverted man who found solace in nature and often escaped to the mountains to clear his mind. One chilly autumn morning, Leo decided to go hiking along a new trail he had never taken before. The air was crisp, and the leaves rustled underfoot, painting a landscape in hues of gold, amber, and scarlet. After a few hours of climbing, Leo reached a secluded part of the forest that seemed untouched by time. The trees towered like ancient sentinels, and the only sound was the distant murmur of a stream. As he sat down to catch his breath, he noticed something peculiar: a small, polished stone on the ground, glistening with an odd, otherworldly glow. But it wasn't just the strange shimmer that caught his attention, it was the soft, heart-wrenching sound of sobbing. Leo knelt down, intrigued, and gingerly picked up the stone. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the sobbing grew louder, resonating in his chest. Startled, he almost dropped it. The stone was warm to the touch, and as he held it in his hands, the sobbing seemed to ease, turning into soft, forlorn whispers. Though he had no idea what this object was or why it was crying, something deep within him urged him to take it with him. Feeling a strange attachment, Leo slipped it into his pocket and made his way home. That night, Leo placed the stone on his nightstand and lay in bed, staring at it. It was still, yet every so often, he thought he could hear a faint murmur, as if it were speaking to him from a faraway place. Finally, he drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by strange dreams of dark forests and whispered secrets. The next morning, he awoke to an overwhelming feeling of unease. But that was only the beginning. From that day onward, Leo's life began to change in ways he couldn't explain. Every interaction he had with people seemed charged, amplified by emotions he didn't recognize. His normally quiet workplace was suddenly buzzing with tension. Colleagues he barely knew came up to him to share intimate secrets, spilling their worries and fears as if compelled. Friends he hadn't seen in years reached out with cryptic messages, seeking comfort for problems he didn't understand. It was as if he had become a magnet for everyone's grief and sorrow. One night, exhausted and overwhelmed, Leo tried to throw the stone away. He drove out to a nearby river, intending to toss it into the current and let it be washed away forever. But as he held it above the water, he felt a pang of guilt, a desperate plea echoing in his mind. He couldn't do it. The sorrow was palpable, and in a strange, inexplicable way, he felt responsible for it. Reluctantly, he returned home, carrying the stone back like a reluctant guardian. He started researching anything he could about mysterious stones, artifacts, folklore, anything that might explain the strange events plaguing his life. But his searches were in vain. No one else seemed to have encountered anything like this before. As the weeks passed, Leo's health began to suffer. He became gaunt and pale, plagued by insomnia and an unshakable sense of dread. The whispers from the stone grew louder, more insistent, filling his mind even in the dead of night. But one evening, just as he was beginning to lose hope, he met an elderly woman at a local antique shop who seemed to know more than she let on. The woman, who introduced herself as Miriam, eyed the stone with a look of grim recognition when Leo showed it to her. "You should never have picked it up," she whispered. "That stone carries a curse, a soul bound in eternal grief, searching for release. It's an ancient spell, created by a sorcerer long ago to contain a spirit who betrayed him." Leo's heart sank. "How can I get rid of it?" he asked, desperation in his voice. Miriam sighed. You can't simply discard it, it's bound to you now. The only way to break the curse is to release the spirit. But be warned, releasing it may come at a cost. Desperate and determined, Leo asked how he could release the spirit. Miriam instructed him to take the stone back to the place where he had found it and perform a ritual at midnight. You'll need a willing soul, she warned, her eyes filled with sorrow. Someone must bear the weight of the spirit's grief and guide it to the afterlife. Leo's mind raced. A willing soul. Who would volunteer for such a task? He returned home, feeling defeated and helpless. That night, as he sat alone with the stone, a strange idea took root in his mind. What if he could bear the spirit's sorrow himself? He had already carried it for weeks, perhaps he could take it on permanently and free the soul within, and so, on the next full moon, Leo returned to the forest, the crying stone in his hands. As midnight approached, he sat in a clearing, reciting the words Miriam had given him. A bitter wind whipped through the trees, and the stone grew heavier, as though fighting him. But Leo pressed on, channeling all his grief and sorrow into the ritual. Suddenly, the stone began to glow, a blinding light filling the clearing. Leo heard a voice, a young woman's voice, whispering her thanks, her words like the soft brush of leaves. The spirit was free. But as the light faded, Leo felt a profound sadness settle in his chest, an ache that seemed to root itself deep within his soul. He knew, then, that he had absorbed the spirit's sorrow, binding himself to it as the stone had once been bound. Life was never the same for Leo after that night. He became a quiet, contemplative figure in his town, known for his kindness and empathy. People were drawn to him, sharing their troubles, and somehow, he always knew just what to say to ease their pain. The sadness he carried had given him a gift, a deep understanding of others' suffering, a wellspring of compassion that transformed him into a source of comfort for those around him. Years passed, and though he never fully understood the mystery of the crying stone, Leo accepted his role as a bearer of sorrow. He lived a long life, quietly tending to the needs of others, finding solace in the peace he could bring to them. And when he finally left this world, it was said that his spirit remained, whispering words of comfort to those who wandered the forest alone, a gentle voice guiding lost souls back to the light.